All right. Hello and welcome. For everyone here in Schaumburg, all of the presentations in this room are also part of the NNP Symposium, meaning we are live streaming them out to a virtual audience as well as the in-person audience. We've been running the NNP Symposium since 2020, and this is our first hybrid event partnering with Central States. It's fully funded by the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society. And for everyone online, welcome as well. You will be able to ask questions during the Q&A just like normal. So if you've been to a symposium before, not much should have changed. So for this presentation, we are joined by Bob Bair, who has been collecting since 1956, talking about the Clark and Gruber territorial gold coins. So Bob, let's see, you are still muted. So go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
I am now loud and clear.
All righty, awesome. Then I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Liana. Well, lots of credit to you, Liana, and to your team, and obviously also to the NNP for establishing this educational format. It's a lot of fun and really a great honor to be part of it. And of course, to you participants, whether you're there in person or Zooming, thank you for clicking in and joining. There's quite a story about Clark and Gruber territorial coins, both in terms of the history of those coins and the three people who made them, and also of Denver, but also for modern collectors who really have a challenge as far as finding Clark and Gruber territorial gold coins. There aren't a lot of them out there. We'll find out more about that as we go along. Let's take a look at how all of this started in the late 1850s. If I can advance. All right, why can't I advance? Oh, help. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, all right. Here's a look at the Platte River area in what was eventually to become Denver along the foothills of the Rockies. And quite a scene it was when gold was discovered, when gold was reported discovered in 1857. Apparently an Indian, a Native American, brought some gold dust in, knowing that it was important to white settlers, and wanted to trade for some of it. He did, but then of course the question was, where did this guy find the gold dust that he brought to us? And it didn't take long before people figured it out, that it was the Platte River area in what is now Denver, Colorado. And because it was then a lot closer, for instance, to St. Louis and the Mississippi River settlements, it was easy for lots of people to get there, easier than it had been for the 49ers having to go across the continent or go around the Cape or whatever. So people just poured in, hoping to find their fortunes. How did it happen? There's gold in them there hills. Gold was found in Dry Creek, kind of south of Denver, and also in the South Platte River. There were all kinds of gold finds, especially in the early going, and also, of course, lots of rumors of gold, or where gold was, or hey, everybody, it's over here. All right, but by the spring of 1860, there were somewhere over 1,000 miners. 1,000 to 1,200 is an estimate, who came there hoping to find gold and end up being rich. And that development caused the city of Denver to just jump up out of nowhere. Notice how it started in spring of 1860 with 1,000 or thereabouts. By July, just a couple months later, all of a sudden there are 6,000 people living in Denver. All right, but now there's a problem. You got 6,000 people there. How and people need to buy food and supplies, and how's it going to work? Because there are no banks or anything there. The money that people had in their pockets or that they'd brought with them is about all that's out there. So initially, of course, business started based on barter and pinches of gold dust. And I ran into a good story that is probably more than apocryphal, but to describe the difficulties of a gold dust barter economy. Imagine Miner Mike, we'll do that alliteration, walking into storekeeper Sam's store needing supplies to go out and find more gold than he already has. And he wants to get some flour and a pickaxe or whatever. As soon as he comes in the store, according to the story, storekeeper Sam has a dried pea in his pocket, in his right-hand pocket, if he's right-handed. As soon as Miner Mike comes in, storekeeper Sam starts squeezing the pea between his thumb and forefinger as hard as he can. And Miner Mike is going around getting things off the shelves and so on, and he comes to the counter to check out. Okay, storekeeper Sam, here I am. All right, that'll be 2 pinches of gold. And then storekeeper Sam drops the pea back in his pocket, pulls out his right hand, which now has indentations in both the thumb and forefinger, reaches into Miner Mike's gold dust pouch, takes out a pinch, takes out another one. Miner Mike looks in the pouch and he's horrified because the dang thing was practically full when he brought it in, and all of a sudden it's half empty because of the very large pinches of gold dust that came out of it. All right, well, the retaliation, according to the story, is that Miner Mike and others figured out that if they had a file and anything made out of brass, and they could grind a little brass into their gold dust and mix it around, that they would be able to take advantage of storekeeper Sam. And who knows who started it first and who knows how long it went on, but you can clearly see from a situation like that, that barter just isn't going to cut it. There has to be a medium of exchange. So what are we going to do? Well, boy, here's Blake Street in the 1860s or so, as 6,000 people or more have poured into Denver. But there still is that problem. What are we going to do for a means of exchange? Well, all right, here come our heroes, the guys who figured it out. Austin Clark, who was a lawyer, Milton Clark, his brother, who primarily, Austin was the storekeeper, basically, and Milton was the attorney. And Emanuel Gruber was a comrade of theirs. They all three had been in Leavenworth, Kansas, where they were involved in running a dry goods business. Austin in particular was head of that in order to equip would-be miners with supplies in Leavenworth. But they figured out, gee, if all the actions over in Colorado, in Jefferson Territory, it was called, let's go there and we'll be closer to the action and we can bring our supplies and so on. But all right, they found the same kind of situation with what do we do for money and means of exchange? Well, these guys are creative, and Milton, being an attorney, helped a lot. Here's a little bit more on each of them. Austin and Milton did the dry goods. Milton also was a lawyer. Gruber was a banker, first in St. Louis, then also went to Leavenworth, and the three followed the miners into Jefferson Territory. All right, they planned to open dry goods sales, and they did. And they planned to open a bank, and they did. And initially, they planned to ship gold dust to the east, to the Philadelphia Mint. But all right, ultimately, and here's where it gets interesting, they decided to mint their own coins. Why? Well, about 10% of the value of the gold dust shipped east was lost to transportation or lost to insurance costs, took all kinds of time, et cetera, et cetera. There's an extreme inefficiency there. There's the danger of robbery, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so the question is, can they do this? Can they mint their own coins? Well, there had been precedent. The Reeds, the Bechtlers, out east, the Mormons in California, Humbert, Kellogg, and others during the California Gold Rush had all minted their own. Here's a quotation that speaks directly to this. I spoke to one of my partners. Milton Clark was a lawyer. This is Gruber speaking now. And he gave it as his opinion that there was no law of the United States which could be construed as against the coinage of money by individuals, provided it was made of full weight. Gruber gave an extensive interview in 1904 that we'll have other quotations from as he looks back on how this worked. But okay, so it's okay for them to make coins. How are they going to do it? Take a look. Not only were they going to be made full weight, but independent assays showed they were always overweight by nearly 1%. They did that on purpose. And that's going to be a short-term plus. It's also going to, in my opinion, lead to a fairly rapid change that made private mintage of coinage illegal in 1864, in large part because Clark and it's Gresham's law, where bad money drives out good. When Clark and Gruber have nearly 1% more gold value and silver value in their coins than federal coinage, that's the preferred means of exchange. They're making government money look bad in a way because that's what people prefer, knowing that there's more there. Now, there isn't enough extra gold and silver in the coin to justify melting it. Man, you'd have to melt like a $10 gold piece. Clark and Gruber gold piece might have $10.09 worth of minerals in it. You'd have to melt them. You'd have to separate the silver, which is always part of Colorado gold. You get a certain amount of silver involved. You'd have to separate those things. It wouldn't be worth the small cost over. So the coinage pretty much stayed intact, even though it was over. All right, so the public obviously accepted it, and it did no doubt contribute, shall we say, to the Coinage Act of June 8th, 1864, that shut down minting of coins by private individuals because Clark and Gruber had become preferred over federal coinage in the Colorado area. Here's a newspaper clipping showing their start. Clark and Gruber and Company, bankers dealing in exchange currency and gold dust, et cetera, et cetera. If you look down at the paragraph in the bottom, here's where they're announcing to the world how they're going to do this to the benefit of the Denver economy, but also individuals who have their coinage. We have, in connection with banking, a mint in large letters, and are prepared to exchange our coin for gold dust. So miners will bring in gold dust, and at the going rate, they'll get Clark and Gruber gold coins back, and then the dust will be made into more coins. Okay, the native gold is coined as it is found, alloyed with silver. The weight will be greater, but the value the same as the United States coin of like denomination. There's their plan. They're telling the world, we're going to make coins, and we're going to make coins that will have gold and a tiny amount of silver in it. And there's going to be more weight in our coins than in the federal ones. Here's a neat pic, and the three guys in the foreground have never really been identified. It's hard to tell. Could any of them, maybe the third guy who looks awfully shrouded could have been one of the Clarks or Gruber. Hard to tell. But this mint building that Clark and Gruber built on land that they bought really in the heart of Denver had 3 stories. They lived in the top floor, and in the basement was where minting took place, and then the bank part with vaults and so on was in that kind of first floor where the 3 guys are standing. Here's another view of it. You can see it in the background, pretty much in the center. It was a tall enough building as a 3-story that it's sticking up above the other buildings that are near it. You can also see the Rocky Mountain News building just to your right, which was the first newspaper in Denver. And we're going to get a quotation from the editor of the Rocky Mountain News pretty shortly about Clark and Gruber's operation. Here's some of the machinery. Milton took a trip back to Philadelphia, wanting to get the machinery that would be necessary for them to mint their own gold coins. So he went out and acquired this machinery is in Denver, Colorado, in the Historical Society. It's the original mintage that was used by Clark and Gruber. But fine, they had to have the machinery to make the coins, and they had to have someone. It's supposed that one of the guys who worked for them was a skilled enough die cutter to be able to create dies that they then could use to make their coinage. Okay, here's that quotation from Rocky Mountain News. Yeah, the editor had been invited over to watch the first minting. Once they had the machinery, once they had the dies, once they had enough gold planchets, hey, editor, come on over and check this out. Watch our operation. So here's what he wrote in the July 25th, 1860 Rocky Mountain News. In compliance with which invitation we forthwith repaired to the elegant banking house of the above firm, and were admitted to their coining room in the basement. 100 blanks had been prepared, weight and fineness tested. The little engine that drives the machinery was fired up, belts adjusted, and between 3 and 4 o'clock, the machinery was put in motion, and mint drops of $10 each began dropping into a tin pail with the most musical clink. About $1,000 were turned out at the rate of 15 or 20 coins a minute, which was deemed satisfactory for the first experiment. So the equipment that Milton had brought back, 15 or 20 coins a minute, you can do pretty well in terms of creating a quantity of coins to fuel the Denver economy. Here's business is cruising very quickly. They catch on very quickly. Here's a check that the Clark and Gruber Company Bank worked out in payment for a couple of horses, and a memorandum, the sort of thing that when you're a miner and you bring in gold dust, they would record how much gold dust you brought in, and they would certify the dollar amount that you're going to get paid for your gold dust. And there's your receipt. And then it's the musical clink into the tin pail to make the coins to pay you off for your gold dust. Okay, they did gold coins extensively, and hang on to this idea a little bit, they also did gold ingots. Here's that 1904 interview with Emanuel Gruber, which he comments further on the ingot thing, and that's going to be of interest to all of us as we go through this presentation and try to figure out what the heck happened to all the Clark and Gruber gold coins. But all right, here's what Gruber said in 1904. Instead of putting the dust into coins this year, that is 1862, they basically in 1860 and 1861 were minting lots of gold coins. But all right, we molded it into small bars, which we stamped with our firm stamp, giving the value in ounces and its cash value. These ingots were accepted all over the world at their stamped value, some of them finding their way to Europe and even Australia. And I'll pause for a sec. The fact that they're accepted worldwide indicates that there was credibility to Clark and Gruber and a demand for those ingots. So lots of ingots must have been made. There's not an indication of how many, but it would seem that many were, and we're coming back to that later. All right, back to the text. Besides gold pieces, we issued greenbacks for the convenience of the miners who did not wish to be weighed down with gold coin. These bills were always redeemed at their face value and did not fluctuate as did the government greenback. Here we go again, they're making the government look bad, but were in reality gold notes having the same value as the yellow metal itself. So these guys they're playing it absolutely honestly and above board, and gaining credibility for their ingots, for their coins, and yes, for their greenbacks that were backed 100% by the gold medal itself. Okay, there's a point where, and we'll see why, the both Clark's and Gruber decided they wanted to sell their building and machinery and so on to the U.S. Here's a letter, which it's a little bit hard to read. It's a nice script, but it's a letter, a sales letter, so to speak, to Salmon Chase, who was then Secretary of the Treasury, basically persuading Chase that that what they have to sell the government is worth owning. All right, and we're going to see more on this later. We've coined nearly $500,000 in 1 year. Well, 1860 and 61, it's not that they were full years, but about a year's time. And used for that purpose only the basement floor, reserving the second floor for the banking office and the third floor for private apartments. It's fair to presume that not over 1/4 of the gold taken out in this territory will be coined at this mint. The remainder will be converted into fine bars. There we are, bars again, and shipped east. The amount taken out this year will be between 4 and 5 million. So the sales job here is, geez, there's a lot of gold out here, and having control of this building and being the only game in town, so to speak, would be beneficial to the U.S. government. If all the room of this building were used for this purpose, it would be ample in our judgment to handle $5 million per annum. Once again, promoting and selling Chase on the idea of you need to own our building and our equipment. It would not require any more machinery, because they have it already, but would require some additional apparatus and fixtures for separating the gold, the raw gold, and making blanks and planchets out of it to be turned into coin, or to be making it into bars. So there's a sell job going on there. August 18th, 1862. There's going to be a response fairly shortly to that. All right. They asked 40 thou for the building, the land, their minting machinery, etc. And they'd gotten it really for a song when they first came to Denver, compared to what they're asking. They were happy to accept 25,000 down from their asking price. All right. So why did they sell? A couple of reasons. The three guys were personally and professionally ready to move on, and we'll see more about that later in terms of where they went and what they did. 2, Congress had supported a branch mint in Denver. They passed enabling legislation in 1862, and then, all right, we do need a building, and they negotiated with Clark and Gruber about buying everything, and by 1863 they had. All right. Supposition on my part, but probably not unreasonable. The government may have been happy to have successful private minters disappear, go away, because Clark and Gruber and Company coins with their value above face value were often preferred to federal coinage. And there we are with Gresham's law again, where bad money drives out good. Just as clad coinage in 1965 helped 90% silver coins disappear in a relatively few years. But all right, and in 1864, the government response was banning, quote, private coinage intended for use as current money. So those are all reasons for Clark and Gruber leaving, and for just coins dated 1860 and 1861, even though made in substantial quantity. We'll see the quantity on this slide now. All right, this is their final business summary, printed in the Rocky Mountain News, done on the 1st of January, 1863. And basically, if you look at the total coinage figure, $594,305 is total coinage. Gruber probably was the guy behind organizing. He was a banker, so he probably organized these numbers. It shows how many they made, in 1861, et cetera, et cetera. But the interesting thing here is that he didn't break out how many were $2.50 coins, how many were $5 coins, how many were tens, how many were 20s. We just have that final figure saying $594,305 were made by Clark and Gruber. That value. As to how many were 2.5s or 5s, we don't know. And that's going to lead to some supposition later by Walter Breen, which is interesting. He did the best he could using that figure of 594,305. So they're kind of signing off with this, and we'll see a little bit more now. So where did they go and what did they do? I mentioned that they were personally and professionally ready to go. Gruber went off to do further banking. He said back to Leavenworth, Kansas. He reopened, so to speak, there, but also in Montana, which was developing, Virginia City, Montana. And he was involved in mining speculation, silver speculation in Leadville, Colorado. So he was a pretty active guy. And obviously, after the Clark and Gruber adventure, he was well resourced. The other guys, the Clark brothers, they continued as bankers in Denver, and they also restarted in Leavenworth, Kansas, where they'd come from. And the Clark and Gruber Mint itself, let's see, I can't read that last line. Let's see, where's my sheet? Clark, I still can't read that. Dang, it got cut off. I don't remember what that line was. Let's move on. It had to do with their sale to the government. That's all. The fact that why did they leave the scene? They got 25 grand. That was good enough to get them going. All right. So what do we know about the 8 Clark and Gruber territorial coin issues? As mentioned, about their original populations, not a whole lot. For instance, in 1861, $240,165 were minted, and Gruber had put that total on that little newspaper clipping, but they're not divided by denomination. And the same thing in 1862, where it was 222,915.50. Okay, now we come to Breen with his famous and very interesting complete encyclopedia of U.S. and colonial coins that came out in 1988. He took the dollar amounts above and some estimates from Donald Kagan, a territorial gold expert, of denomination rarity to come up with guesstimates on Breen's part as to, all right, so how many 1862 and a halfs were there? Breen hedged about 15,096 for 1862 and a halfs, about 6,920, etc. The numbers are fairly small. I mean, if you take a look, the 1861 2.5 in Breen's estimate had the largest mintage of 31,800. That's not much, but we're also going to analyze and examine Breen's estimate in terms of, well, how reliable are they? In 1988, as the grading services, for instance, are just getting started. Breen didn't have a lot of information there other than what he got from Kagan about rarities, and also the total dollar value of gold minted by Clark and Gruber and company. Okay, so what do the third-party grading services currently have to say? There are the usual caveats there that we know about. Every time someone thinks they can get a coin graded a little bit higher, they'll crack out and resubmit. So that obviously, to some unknown degree, can skew the population reports that Annex, NGC, and PCGS put out. And also, obviously, there are some surviving Clark and Gruber coins that are uncertified. They're either in old-time collections where people just don't care to have them certified, or who knows, there may be survivors buried up in them there hills above Denver in the Rockies. That may be part of surviving populations. But let's take a look at the first one in terms of what Breen estimated and what the population reports say. All right, there it is, PCGS 76, NGC 34 and 17 details, Annex 6+8, 141 are accounted for. And again, remember the caveats, crackouts for resubmissions, etc. Man, that's 0.9% of Breen's estimate of over 15,000. Holy cow, that's tiny. Let's look at the next one. Here we are with the 1861 2.5. Breen's calling it at 31,800. All right, here's the population reports, 185 total. That's 0.6%. Now, by the way, as we see these figures and see how tiny they are in terms of the grading services, just think about collectors. I mean, how many collectors are not going to be able to find these coins because unless an old time collection or a hoard is found in the Rockies or something, there just aren't many, according to the population reports, for today's collectors to come up with. Okay, here we are with the 1865. Breen says 6920. Total available, according to the services, 201, 2.9%. Here we go again with 1861.5. Breen says about 19,000. The services say 132 total, 0.7% of what Breen had guesstimated. Here we go to the 10, a very imaginative portrayal of Pikes Peak is on the reverse of this one. It drew laughter even in those days from anyone who had seen or knew Pikes Peak, but hey, it's a mountain or something, and fine, it's on the on the back of the coin. But all right, Breen says about 3,500. The services say 229, 6.5% of what Breen's estimate was. Here's the 1861.10, which looks very much like federal coinage. They wanted to do that to increase acceptance by having it, look familiar, as well as, their statement that it would have more weight, more value. But all right, Breen guesstimates 15,900. The services have 344, 2.2%. Let's go to the 20s. Here's the 1860-20. Breen says 1,020 total, and the services end up with a total that's 2.6% of Breen. We're getting these tiny figures all the way through. Here, by the way, this is pretty famous. The Frederick Mayer collection. He was very interested in, he lived in Denver and was quite well off. So he put together a collection of Clark and Gruber territorial gold. His 20 is the finest known. He died in 2005 or 6, and Heritage sold this finest known 20, showing the very imaginative Pikes Peak design again, for 690,000, which sounds like nothing today in multi-million-dollar auction results. But in 2006, 690,000 is a strong bid, and the coin is so beautiful and so well preserved that there was obviously competition by people in 2006 who had the resources to try to get the finest known. Here's the reverse side of that Mayer $20 gold, the finest known. And I just wanted to get those pictures from Heritage just to show you what the finest known 20 that survived out of those very tiny survival percentages, what it looks like and how neat it is. Okay, here's the 1861 20 modeled again after federal coinage, looking very much the same. Breen says about 6360, 49, 0.8% of Breen say the three services. Once again, a tiny figure. So, all right, so what happened? Where have all of these things gone? When Breen's estimates are so varied from the three grading services. Okay, there are some possibilities. and probably some combination of these. And we'll take a look at each of these. Breen's production estimates were too high. There's no doubt about that. He did the best he could with what he knew about that total dollar figure that Clark and Gruber made, and also rarity estimates from Don Kagan. But all right, second bullet point, there are some of them that exist somewhere in old time collections uncertified, and or are buried somewhere up in the Rockies overlooking Denver. But miners didn't. Lots of people in the mid 19th century didn't trust banks, so there probably are some buried. And here and there, maybe some metal detector people will end up finding some of them. We'll have to see. All right, some of them, no doubt, were melted under FDR's Executive Order 6102, to devalue the US dollar, but also put gold bars in Fort Knox. Some number of Clark and Gruber gold coins were part of that melting and are currently in bars in Fort Knox. But all right, and here's my speculation for you guys. The most likely possibility, I think, is that, as we saw from Gruber's commentary about the ingots that were stamped with the Clark and Gruber logo, and also the weight and value of their ingots that traded all around the world, it sure seems to me that it's highly likely that Clark and Gruber melted a lot of their own coins to then just as FDR ordered with the Fort Knox situation and the gold recall. It's Clark and Gruber are very likely to have done the same kind of thing with their gold coins. They've made so many, they have some number in their bank, melt them down, make them into ingots, just change the form, and around the world they go. So that's my speculation, is that's an important part of why there are so incredibly few Clark and Gruber gold coins existing for collectors today, at least in terms of what the three certification services, PCGS, NGC, and Annex have told us about them. Okay, well, here we are. It was the end of an era on the Western frontier. It was short. Clark and Gruber were in operation just for those 2 years, 1860, 61, with coins, and then their ingots. And they made it possible. Their building was in the center of Denver, as I mentioned, and Denver's growing, but now there's a medium of exchange that is accepted and believed in and used, that helped make Denver a major city, certainly in the mid 19th century and up to the present day. But without the jump starting from Clark and Gruber and their coinage, it's hard to tell what Denver might look like today. A dusty cow town or something like that, but not much else. But those guys coming along when they did, with their idea of making private coinage as had been done before, and that wasn't illegal until 1864, perhaps in part because their coinage had more value in it than its face value, to the possible embarrassment of the U.S. government. That made a huge difference to the city of Denver and its growth and development. Here are some of the sources that I used in gathering information for this. I had a whole lot of fun doing this. I'm a transplanted Badger from Wisconsin. Came out, I'm a retired school principal. I came out here because educational opportunity beckoned to me, and I've enjoyed Denver a lot, but just the idea of researching Clark and Gruber territorial gold coins was great fun for me, and putting together this presentation for all of you and having presented it elsewhere has been just wonderful for me, and I hope moderately interesting, at least for all of you that have tuned in here. So that concludes my my production here, my presentation. I guess Liana will come back on, and if there are comments or questions that you guys have, you can submit them to her, and she'll bounce them back at me, and we'll see if I can comment on them. So go ahead, Liana. Ball's in your court again.
All right, I'm going to have you go ahead and stop the screen share. There should be a red button at the top of your screen.
Okay, it says stop share. All right, that's the one. Okay, click. There. All right, now we're back.
All right. Let me get myself off of the screen in the room. We don't need two of me. All right.
Wow,
So
Liana, it would be such fun to have two of you.
So for questions, if you are on Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of that window. Just click on that to send in questions. I will read all of them off anonymously, so you don't need to worry about that. Otherwise, for those in the room, do we have any questions? Yep.
Yeah, just one comment. The ANA just got a nice, I can't remember if it was a loan or donation of Clark and Gruber pieces, but they have a nice collection of Clark and Gruber, which is appropriate because of their location. So that's good to know. And then secondly, regarding the survivability of the Clark and Gruber pieces, so if we go by the pre numbers, we were about 1 or 2%. I think if you look at other U.S. gold coins of that period, you find similar numbers. So I don't think that these are necessarily survived in lower proportion than something out of San Francisco did.
All right, did that come through on your end, Bob?
I could hear him talking, but I could not clearly understand what he was saying or his question. He's far enough away from your mic that you're going to have to be the interpreter or the translator or whatever for any questions from the room.
Yes, so it was a couple comments. One, the ANA has recently received a donation or loan of a lot of Clark and Gruber pieces. So if anyone watching is interested in seeing a group of them, the ANA does have some now. And what was the other one? He's just going to come up here.
Hi, yeah, the comment was regarding the 1 or 2% survivability that the Breen numbers suggest. I would say I think you would see similar numbers for regular federal U.S. gold coins out of New Orleans or San Francisco. I don't think that number is terribly out of whack.
You know, and now we come to FDR's, 6102 executive order to melt gold coins, turn them into bars after having upped the value of gold from $20.67 to 35 an ounce. So yeah, there's no doubt that gold coin collectors today are facing very limited numbers in all gold coins, certainly 19th century gold coins that are now sitting in Fort Knox in a different form. So, I'm sure you're quite right with that. That's a big part of those tiny population statistics compared to what Breen had guesstimated.
All right, we do have quite a few that have come in over Zoom. Do you know the fineness of these coins? Is it a federal equivalent or something else?
I don't know the specific fineness. All I can say is that every time any were assayed, and they were assayed as they came out in the 19th century, 100% of the time, their value was greater than the face value. So whatever fineness the gold was, they accommodated that fineness to make sure that they had, as the example I gave, that they had $10.09 worth of gold and silver in one of their $10 gold coins. So they adjusted that, but I do not know the specific find. I'm sure it depended on where the miners who brought in their gold dust, where in Colorado they had found it, because it would be variable fineness as the miners came up with it. But all right, then Clark and Gruber would accommodate for whatever fineness it was with the receipts that we saw a slide of, where all right, you've turned in gold dust that has a value of so and so many dollars, and here's our Clark and Gruber gold coins for it. It was not, I'm sure, an easy minting situation for those guys because of that variability. But when they're absolutely ironclad on the idea that our coins are going to have greater value by a small amount than their face value, that's a winner all the way around, even though I'm sure they had to do constant assaying themselves and constant adjusting based on variable fineness.
All right, do we have any other questions in the room? Oh, back to Zoom. Do you have any population data on Clark and Gruber ingots existing today?
I don't know who would record ingot populations, because I don't know if PCGS, NGC, or Annex certify things like that, or if anyone else does or keeps track of that. So that's another one of those areas where, geez, how many are still out there in Australia and Europe, as Emmanuel Gruber put it, that nobody has taken a census of, although they made lots of them for them to have gone to those remote corners of the globe.
Okay, a couple of related questions about the ingots. Are there any estimates of how many gold ingots were made by Gruber and Company?
Nope. And Gruber, I wish the 1904 interview had asked more specific questions like that, or even if the interviewer had said, about how many 2.5s do you suppose you made, or something like that. But in 1904, I guess the interviewer and the numismatic community wasn't real concerned about the kind of details that we're getting questions on now. Legitimate questions. Yeah, how many ingots did they make? Gruber didn't tell us. And we don't know now.
Mm-hmm. Are the ingots commonly available in today's market?
I have never seen one. On the other hand, I really haven't tried to track them down. That's a good question. I don't know. Could you find them on eBay? Could you find them in a Stax Bowers auction or a Heritage? I don't know. That would be an interesting little project. I may take a look in some of the auction records. For instance, after the Central America hoard was recovered from the depths of the ocean, a lot of bars were found and were sold at major auctions. Maybe that same sort of thing has happened with Clark and Gruber ingots. I don't know, but there we might find some number of auction record examples of what a Clark and Gruber ingot would sell for today. That's a good question, and I'm going to try to look into that, but I don't have a clue right now.
All right, I think you've touched on this some, but just to elaborate a bit, did any Clark and Gruber bars or currency survive?
Well, I guess, but I don't know specifically how many got melted. Also, as part of, could they have gotten melted in under Executive Order 6102? They weren't really coins, but they were gold. They could have. Are they out there in the world? Could well be. A lot of them went out there, and there must still be some.
All right, and then we do have someone on Zoom who wanted to share that you have a great article in the Numismatist September 2018 issue on Clark and Gruber. So for anyone looking for more information. Okay, then that is the last thing that's currently in the Zoom. So if you are watching online and have any other questions, send them in now. Otherwise, any others that have come up in the room? Yeah.
What was your source for piece that you showed that Heritage sold in 2006, and you say it was belonged to Frederick Bair? The catalogs, I just looked it up, it says the Great Western Collection of territorial gold.
What was your source for the piece that Heritage sold in 2006? The
finest 20, that the Frederick Bair item. I did this presentation for the Denver Rotary, and someone there I did that in like 2012. Someone there knew Mayor's widow and came up to me afterward and mentioned, you should know that Mayor had a tremendous collection of this stuff. So then I did look for in Heritage's records and found pics of that finest known 20, and it was just too beautiful for me not to, take a shot and include it in this.
I'll clarify something for you. I worked for Fred Mayer and he died in February 14, 2007. I looked at him too. His family still has his collection. So I don't think that was his piece.
Okay, the audience member said he worked for Fred Mayer, and his family still has his collection, so he doesn't think it was the same piece.
And he died a year later.
Someone paid $690,000 in 2006 for it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mayer family still has. Mayer had, I believe, a complete collection and maybe some duplicates, but at least that biggie got sold. And I don't think Heritage would have put it out there as a Mayer piece had it not been a Mayer piece. And I don't think there would have been a bidder and at least one underbidder willing to go up to 690,000 if it was not confirmed that this had been a Frederick Mayer piece and that, yes, it was the finest known. That's all I can come up with on that one.
This is Fred Mayer. It's listed under another name. And Fred died a year later. And when he died, he left specific instructions not to sell that part of his collection. And it was on loan to the Colorado Historical Society.
He would like to clarify that it was not listed under John Mayer or Fred Mayer. It was listed under a different name. And when he died a year later, there were specific instructions regarding that part of his collection to, what was it?
Not to be sold.
Not to be sold.
And it's on loan to the Colorado Historical Society for a while. May not still.
Okay, and it was on loan to the Colorado Historical Society for a while.
And all I know is the record that I got from Heritage, from HA, Heritage Auctions, that showed the sale of the finest known 20, and they attributed it to Frederick Mayer. So I'll pass the buck to them. If it was not his or whatever, it isn't my fault.
All right, we do have other questions, so we'll move on. How long have you been researching Clark and Gruber gold?
Oh, I started on it. I came to Denver in 2001 and started on it, I don't know, probably 2010-ish or whatever, in addition to being a school principal, which did keep me busy. But I like doing stuff like that. I'm pretty sure it was 2012 when I did it for Denver Rotary. Might have been 2013. But then, yes, as you pointed out, Liana, I turned it into a submission to the ANA's monthly magazine, The Numismatist, and they accepted it as well. It's not like I spent, months and years on it or anything like that. I don't even remember how much time I spent on that because I love doing research and presentations. I've got probably, I'll pick a number, 25 different numismatic presentations that I do, for instance, for the ANA e-learning academy. I've done, I think, 4 for you guys at NNP. And I've written, I don't know, maybe 15 or so articles for the Numismatist. So I bop around a lot as I come up with an idea or find something interesting, and I work on it and I get it in the best shape that I can with what I know. And then I'm like a butterfly going to the next flower to find something else in numismatics to research and write about. So that's a hard question to answer. I don't really remember how much time I spent solely on Clark and Gruber territorial gold. I had a lot of fun with it though, and I'm having a lot of fun with it now.
All right. Have you visited Daniel Carr's Moonlight Mint, registered as Clark Gruber and Company?
I have been to, in fact, Dan Carr did medallion for the Denver Coin Club, which I'm a member of, and had kind of a minting party, must have been about a month ago. And I went up to see the moonlight mint at that time. And Dan did a tremendous presentation on how his machinery works, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He spoke for about 45 minutes. So that was enriching to me as well, to see a modern guy sort of making his own designs, at least, and very frequently using US coins to overstamp so that he's not going to get drawn in for counterfeiting or anything like that. He's using, for instance, a 1922 peace dollar to make his 1964 peace dollar Dan Carr replica or whatever. But because he's used real money, there's no crime involved in that. He's not violating the 1864 law against prohibition of private coinage to be used as money, because he's not.
All right, then that is the last one that we have in Zoom for now. So if anyone else online has any questions, send them in now. Otherwise, are there any others in the room? Nope. Okay, then I will go ahead and wrap us up. And if any come in, we will get to them at the end. Otherwise, thank you everyone for attending or watching online. I'm sure most of you have heard my spiel by now, but in case you don't know, all of the presentations are being recorded and will be uploaded to the NNP about 2 weeks from Saturday. So if you are registered for the symposium, which everyone watching online should be, then you will receive an email when those are up. If you're here in person and would like to receive an email when those are available, we encourage you to register for the symposium. It is entirely free. Both of these signs, the one up here and the one outside the door, have a QR code as well as a URL that you can scan. It takes about 2 minutes. So if you do that, you'll get an email when the recordings are up. Otherwise, there will be an announcement on our website as well as our social media. So that's it for today. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow, depending on your time zone, at 10 a.m. Central. And we hope to see some of you all back tomorrow. And we have no other questions in the Q&A, so that's going to wrap us up. Thank you all.